do here? Okay, how am I going to do this? All right, this is guess I'm sure. This is a cutting from a new novel that's so new it's not out yet, called Glimmer the Bright Moonshine, and this is the first rejected copy of the cover, but you get an idea of what it's about at least. I could kind of do this, using up some of my time here. Okay. All right, glasses. This is a ghost story without any ghosts. This scene is a visit to the Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris with rather involved motivation. This explores the protagonist pursuing something that's actually pursuing her at the same time. This particular pursuit turns out to be a dead end. But it's also the beginning of an unfolding in the plot. And please pardon my French, the accent that is. Exiting the metro, Sue felt the air change from a combination of stuffy and dusty to decidedly muggy and a bit less dusty. The moist air painted an impressionistic face on the world outside of the metro, a kind of a Lubitsch gauze. Sue felt like Marlene Dietrich on the staircase in Sunset Boulevard as she strode up the concrete stairway to street level. Palpable atmosphere. Sue feigned to waft it away as she journeyed down the faintly malodorous sidewalk of the Boulevard Père Lachaise, typically busy at 4:15 p.m. Just the sort of air that lends itself to a haunted cemetery experience, she thought. She waved her hand through the air, feeling the heaviness against her exposed arms. Her white peasant blouse with a tiny red rose trim surrounding the bodice was already clinging to her stomach and back. This felt like Da Nang level heat and humidity, except that the rice groves, vegetation, and bicycles of Da Nang were conspicuously absent, brought home to her as she stepped off the curb and narrowly missed an oncoming smart car as its horn beeped rudely and angrily but ineffectually at her. She could feel her sandals sticking to the balls of her feet, just at the base of her toes, followed by sticky arches and the heels, the sandals pulling as her skin velcroed to the sandals, making a clop, clop sound that could barely be heard over the traffic, but could definitely be felt. She looked around to gather her bearings. 3 pigeons flew by and landed on a balcony together, as if the air were too massive for them to negotiate further. They looked away from Sue. A distant sing-song emergency vehicle sound punctuated the traffic, and her clop, clop, creating a rhythmic Parisian ambient. Entering the cemetery, she felt a sense of being inside a historic park, rather than a sense of foreboding. A slight breeze whispered through the trees and seemed to fall to the ground under the weight of humidity. But the scene was tranquil, not threatening or morose. She took a brochure at the main gate, opened it, and turned it this way, then that way, then back to the first. Her map reading skills at a minimum, she decided to rely on her research and instinct. The best way to handle this was to turn left and proceed, which she did. Most of the names on the graves were unknown to Sue, but the wording often caught her, and she read many of the inscriptions as her expectations grew. Approaching Isadora Duncan's resting place, Sue sensed the pungent aroma of Gauloise cigarettes, a distinctly Parisian flavor, and one that in years past permeated the whole of Paris. Now it was more rare, more than a bit harsh and appropriately inexpensive. The old Gauloise had been replaced by a tamer version, with less of the old Paris evident. But this bouquet was clearly reminiscent of the old Gauloise. She sniffed the air, but could not tell what direction this somewhat spiritual air, almost an aura, was coming from. From Isadora? Well, that would be fun, but a little far-fetched. Gauloise always had the ability to broadcast widely, so it could have come from anywhere. And the impression had more to do with nostalgia than otherworldliness. Her attention turned to Isadora's grave marker. It read, Isadora Duncan, 1877 to 1927, École des Ballets des Opéras de Paris. Nothing appeared on the tombstone about the Bugatti that essentially decapitated her in a grand gesture that ended badly. Her last words were purported to have been, "Adieu, mes amis, je vais la galade." Goodbye, my friends, I am off to glory. Later, it was learned that that was a sanitized version. Her last real words were, "Je vais la mort," I am off to love. Her friends were apparently embarrassed by her real words. Imagine Parisians in 1927 being embarrassed by anything. Sue made a left turn on Avenue Transversale number 3. Oscar Wilde was situated among a few trees, like many graves, facing away from the boulevard Rue des Pyrénées, followed by Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. Edith Piaf was nearby. Modigliani was a stone's throw from Moliere's grand resting place. An appropriate right turn led to Sarah Bernhardt and down to Rossini, Colette, up to Chopin, and finally the grave, shrine, and memorabilia dumping site for Jim Morrison. The humidity began to coalesce into a mist. The few and occasional shadows had given way to a uniform appearance. Looking up, Sue could see the clouds darken through the plush, mature oaks. Rain was imminent. She took the compact umbrella out of her purse and unfurled it. She tried to be very careful not to look too USA on this trip. She did not want to deal with any of the drama associated with tourism or attitudes toward the United States. The predominantly gray umbrella unfolded, showing in clear and large letters, Humane Society of the United States of America. She had received the umbrella as a gift from the Humane Society in exchange for a donation, and she had forgotten about that. Sue took a big swig of the mossy, wet air, wiping perspiration from her face with her already damp sleeve. Looking around, she was practically alone, which comforted her. She would have thought that the crowd would be larger, Père Lachaise being such a tourist attraction. Sue had just begun to try to decipher the Greek inscription on Morrison's tomb when she was startled by a sharp slap on her shoulder. An embarrassed gentleman, both hands raised with supplicating gesture, looked both apologetic and focused. Votre parfum m'attire des moustiques. I beg your pardon. Sue was approaching fight or flight mode already. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were, I thought you were French, but I see now the inscription on your umbrella. Sue turned the umbrella facing her, saw the Humane Society inscription, and said, "Oh, crap." I may not be fluent, but I do understand quite a bit, and that is an unintelligible hodgepodge accent. I caught the word mosquito, I think. Sue looked back at the grave marker. The gentleman said, I didn't hit you, I hit a mosquito that was dining on your shoulder. And I said, admittedly, in my Louisiana, Cajun, Jewish, French, your perfume attracts mosquitoes. Sue turned back to the gentleman. It's not my perfume, it's my natural scent. Feeling more playful than suggestive, he said, "What else does it attract?" Sue looked at him straight between the eyes and slowly said, "You don't want to know." Thank you. Okie dokie, we want all of the authors, all the writers to come up. We're going to take a picture. Thank you.